Okay, folks, so welcome to the February 19th meeting of the New Hampshire Network Energy Working Group at our new time, which is 2 p.m., still on the third Thursday of the month. And I put in the chat suggested 2 items for an agenda. I can repaste it because not all of you were here, but the 2 items were Clean Energy New Hampshire sent around an action alert inviting people to ask their select boards to sign on to a letter in support of SB 538. And it looks like you've already hosted your session. It happened at noon today.
I've got a
And
recording of that. It just goes into the way deep dive history of how this came to be for anyone who's curious.
okay. And then Sarah, you mentioned, you've got a number of communities that are feeling a bit adrift and
Well,
maybe
I was actually having that conversation with Dory, who's here, so
okay.
we may be able to get to
Um,
the source in terms
and
of framing it.
well, I think it's
Oh,
excellent timing.
funny. So it was based on me?
Well, that one was based on you, but I was in another meeting where you guys may have filled out the survey that Susan Richmond asked everybody to send out about New Hampshire Network. And then we had a meeting to discuss the results of the survey. And some of the discussion, it kind of came up that, well, having this energy working group is kind of nice, but we don't really seem to have any strategy. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. I have not, as a meeting coordinator, provided strategy, and my own energy committee has officially fizzled, and said we're not going to meet anymore because we just feel like there's not much we can do right now. Which is too bad because I was the main coordinator of the last two drive electric fairs, the EV fairs that we had. And I just sent out to the committee, hey, are we going to do another one this year? And of the 5 members, only one other person said yes. Everybody else was like, we're too busy with other stuff. So that was kind of disheartening.
Why don't you have anything to do? We have more than enough to do.
Well, shall we go ahead and talk about this and kind of jump right in? What we've, so in Merrimack, right, which is a pretty sizable town, right? We have tried to get at least like one electric vehicle, and we've tried to get solar panels on the town garage. Both of those fell through because the town council, they were interested in the solar panels, but then when it turned out that, it would cost more than they thought, or it would take, 5 to 10 years to recoup the cost, they weren't that interested. Plus, getting all the rebate stuff is very confusing. We did a whole bunch of button-up workshops. We did 2 EV fairs, and like 3 people would come to the button-up workshops. We can't seem to get either our town council or the town themselves that interested in doing more solar panel kind of or EV projects, which is too bad. So for example, we had a big push because we were building new school administrative buildings. We're like, perfect, it's a brand new building. Let's put solar panels up there. As a matter of fact, the entire administrative building got voted down because the town decided it didn't have enough money to build the building at all. So anyway, so I'd love to hear you in Sandwich, like, what is it that you are doing that maybe we could try to do? Because it sounds like you're going great guns.
Well, in addition to us having a big solar array voted down, our sister town of Center Harbor had the same thing happen the same year. We decided it was time to have some wins. And EVs and solar panels right now have a lot of controversy. You get people saying they're going to kill people with the rays that come off it, all that crazy stuff. So we did the low-hanging fruit, which is what your button-up workshops teach us. Conservation, buttoning up buildings is the first thing we should all be doing before we start spending a ton of money on heat pumps and all this other stuff. So we had one of those, we had free audits from both. Well, New Hampshire Electric Co-op was only going to pay half of the energy audit until they heard the part of town that has Eversource was getting them 100% paid for. So they agreed to match that. So we had energy audits done. Now,
Is this of like public buildings or is this people's homes?
now all town
Town.
buildings. So we had we didn't have some little town buildings done, but all the major ones done that use a lot of energy. We got all the recommendations, which now means we can go for financing because you have to have proof that it's going to save money. So you can't put in insulation and get rebates without an audit to prove that it's going to save money, because they give you all the numbers when they do the audit. The other hint about that too is if you can get a company that will do the audit plus contract out all the work, they will do that. Although the ones that, unfortunately, the New Hampshire Saves recommended an auditor who doesn't do that. So now we had to do find all the contractors. But if you could find a company that does the audit, there's one homeowners have used out of Rochester, and then they will submit everything to the New Hampshire Saves, all the rebate paperwork, saves the town ton of paperwork. And then things like one building, the old way of thinking of the town leaders was, oh, well, when the propane furnace dies, we stick in another propane furnace. Now we have the audits, which give all kinds of alternatives. The Energy Committee is like watching every move they make. Whenever they buy a vehicle, we want them to see if there's EVs available, which are just starting to come through on that state buying club thing, whatever you call it. And then but we're getting an EV, a battery lawnmower for our Parks and Rec to do the lawn. So that's at least a little win. We've got a heating system failed in our town garage. And instead of just replacing it, they're now using more efficient, we've got heat pump estimates, we've got insulating to do, we've got a more efficient backup heater to use. So that's keeping us very busy. And those are things that a lot of it's coming out of the town maintenance budget, because they're paying not with Energy Committee money or just a town fund. They're paying, they were going to have to do stuff anyway. So that keeps us pretty busy. And there's also well, the Energy Committee is just helping, but CCL in Lakes Region is going to put on a Love Your Earth Day on May 9th in Laconia. And we're going to try to get companies in that can talk about balcony solar, to teach people about things like that are new innovations instead of just the same old, same old.
Yeah.
Because you're right, people are going, whoa, wait a minute, maybe I'll wait and the next administration might give me that 30% back for solar.
Yeah.
I mean, we put solar in on 2 town buildings before you got the 30%. So that's bought and paid for. We're getting free power now on these old, they're like a dozen years old or so. They're all paid off, and we didn't get 30% on that. So that just makes us mad when we hear that argument.
Yeah. 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 Paul, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yes. I wrote a 5-page paper on the impact of hyperscaler data centers on New Hampshire's energy supply. Back in December, I delivered a copy to the chair of the network, asked him to put it into the file so you people could access it. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but what it does is it deals with the issue of where is the energy going to come from in New Hampshire, given the current state of affairs. And the reason that this is important for your group is that you're going to be impacted should we fall short in energy supply. And my paper shows that we will fall short of energy supply sometime in the next 5 years, and that the impact will be quite dramatic on the ratepayers in New Hampshire. In other words, every one of these towns is going to be looking for energy for their residents, and you are going to be in competition with data centers that use anywhere from 25 megawatts to 1.2 gigawatts of power. In other words, anywhere from roughly 12% of the power delivered into New Hampshire on any given day to about 90% of the power. Now, it's called the law of supply and demand. When a data center comes in here, and they will be coming in here over the next few years, they're going to draw the power from the grid just like you draw power from the grid. And you are going to have to compete with them for that power supply. And as a result, your rates are going to go up. The paper shows that in Virginia, the rates more or less doubled. And this has been the general experience of towns, of states all over the United States. Now, right now, you're dealing with a few things you should be interested in. One is, how are you going to meet the energy supply so the rates in all of your towns don't go through the roof? And one plan, which was put in place by the New England Energy Grid, was to bring online these wind farms on the coast. Now, you may they were all online in 2026 and 2027. Trump administration put an administrative hold on this and also said there will be no further approvals. We're wind power.
Oh, Paul, you're breaking up. I don't know if you're driving or something, but we can't hear you.
Okay, I don't want to take up your time, but the point is that there have to be alternatives for the towns in New Hampshire. And there are. There is a bill, I believe it's SB 589, committee in the Senate, and it calls for the Energy Department in New Hampshire to establish a pilot microgrid in the state. And a microgrid essentially isolates a community solar farm from the grid. Okay. And that bill actually would point you toward where towns might go in the future rather than trying to advocate for a solar array on top of a building. You can advocate for a solar farm in your community in the 5 to 10 megawatt range, which would enable your town not to suffer from blackouts, not to suffer from price increases, because you would have your own source of energy. Now, the Energy Department is authorized to do a study, and 589 is more or less an enabling law to give them funds. So I would think that you ought to take the time to read my paper, see what it says about the implications for the communities in New Hampshire with regard to energy, and look at some of the recommendations in there. These are strategic recommendations. And, getting the communities behind some of these recommendations will definitely influence energy policy in the state and push it back towards solar, because there are enormous price advantages coming out of building solar farms. They go up in 6 months. They produce 5 to 10 to 20 megawatts of energy. That energy all comes in at a rate that is, like 4 cents a kilowatt hour to 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And therefore, you are getting the energy cheap, and you are protected against any fluctuations in demand on the grid. So that's all I have to say. You can look to see where it is in your, if it was put into the file somewhere, or if I can resend it to you and you can distribute it to your members. And then if you want to do any further discussion, you can contact me. I'll be happy to explain the details.
Yes, please do resend, and then we will get it up on the website and maybe have a specific meeting if we've had it, giving people a chance to read it, either a specific energy working group meeting, or the steering committee might read it and I don't know. I don't know if we might decide we'd like to invite you as a speaker, to one of the other work groups or something like that. But thank you
Where
very much.
should I send it? Where should I send it?
Reinmar, do you want to put your address?
Yeah, I'll put several addresses, Paul, that you can send it to.
Okay, my email address is runupit. That's
Yeah, I've got yours. How about,
RUNUPIT. Great.
yeah, I have your email
Okay,
address.
thanks.
I'll send you the steering committee addresses, and you can send it to us. How about that?
Okay, that's fine. I would love to see it discussed by the Energy Committee. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Paul.
As with most things not that have to do with energy, nothing is easy. But Paul, what you just suggested sounded like a potentially very important strategic direction for towns to think about, and it would not be something that's easy to do in one town meeting cycle to get, a microgrid organized and voted on and built and all that. So thank you for the heads up, right? So it would take time and it's something we need to think about. Yeah. And thank you, Sarah, in the chat, put a link to the bill that Paul was referring to and the Clean Energy New Hampshire summary of that bill, which they do support. Any other comments in terms of other energy companies feeling adrift or having suggestions for what we as a working group of committees might want to focus on?
Oh, since one of the one of the legs that this topic was standing on was a conversation that I had with Sarah and Frank Richter. For us, one of the hats I wear is co-coordinator for the Peterborough Renewable Energy Project, or PREP.
Mhm.
And PREP had done back in 2021, done a warrant article to approve 100% renewable goals for the entire town. And the first one that comes up is for electricity. And so we had hoped that we could do a solarized campaign of some sort this year to start really trying to ramp that up. And without the 30% tax credit, it is really difficult. And so we're trying to figure out, with Clean Energy New Hampshire's help, how to move forward with encouraging residential solar. So PREP is not an energy committee, and so our audience is residents as opposed to the municipal buildings. And so we're still trying to figure it out. But because the electricity renewable goal, 100% renewable goal, is coming up in 2030, we are feeling some urgency. And we definitely want to do what Catherine was talking about and highlight New Hampshire Saves, especially since they have a new program that is actually really exciting for moderate income families.
And that's just Eversource, but yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so it's not okay, it's just the Eversource towns. So the Eversource towns have a new program that will give up to $15,000 or 100% of the project to moderate income families. And they're defining it as 100% of the state median income. So that is a huge increase for those families of what they could have gotten, which would be like $6,000 and that would be just 75% of the cost of the project. So that is something that we are definitely going to be promoting. And then also, the Monadnock region will have a new program from the hub to help people afford all kinds of things that had been supported by the IRA. And so you can get up to $7,000 in the Monadnock region. Even with that, though, it feels like a really heavy lift to get to 100% renewable electricity. And so, yeah, Prep had like the most depressing meeting we've had since we started in 2018.
Sorry that it was so depressing, but thanks for soldiering on, because prep has also been one of the most forward thinking, you guys are so much further ahead in your region than I am in Merrimack, just by virtue of what you've been working on and thinking of and all that kind of stuff.
Did the balcony solar bill pass, or hasn't it come up yet?
In a sec, I can probably find out. I don't know off the top of my.
I'm pretty sure that it's passed the Senate committee, and next step is to get voted on by the full Senate. I'm pretty sure the challenge will be when it gets over to the House.
I'm remembering where my team said we left off on this. Bill, you're right about that. My understanding is that many of the stakeholders have been in alignment, have come into alignment around the current text. My team has been working with a national expert that's been reviewing these policies around the country, who has some very good feedback on how to improve the text. So there's a bit of a rewrite happening as it moves into the other chamber. And then there will be sort of another wave of going to the code officials and all of those various stakeholders to get alignment again and try to get through. So we're in that process. But still hopeful was the last I heard from my team. Is that,
Yeah.
all of that to say, this one feels like one that we're hoping will keep going. And Val, I'm trying to find the bill number. This is where
I think it's SB 540.
Okay. Yes, here we go. I'll get you the couple of links to that in the chat. Thank you, Bill. One of my deficits is not being able to remember bill numbers. That's a challenging thing.
But I think realistically, all of these bills are predicated on getting UL certification. And as far as this being right around the corner, I'm not holding my breath. I think it's kind of its own regulatory process here, and getting the bills passed is the first step to show that there is a potential marketplace out there and put the heat on UL. But whether or not you'll be seeing them and
yes, these things move slowly.
in Home Depot Christmas of next year, I have my doubts, but see.
Another thing that hasn't been mentioned, but I know my team is curious about is the impact that CPACER could have in our ability to reach out to local commercial property owners and try to help them get excited about energy projects in ways they haven't before. What my team at Clean Energy New Hampshire is focused on right now is simply educating town administrators and staff and select boards on what this is, because they have to authorize it within each municipality in order for commercial entities to access that financing. So that's step one. But sort of coming up quickly on the heels of that, there's been some conversation on the energy circuit rider team about what we can do to try to educate ourselves about the types of lenders and the types of loans. It feels very clear what the case is for the large development projects, the multifamily housing, sort of large commercial. Those large developers are very excited and already chomping at the bit and getting ready to use CPACER. My question is, for those of us who are on energy committees and who are interested in our like locally owned businesses and how they might benefit from access to financing like this, it would be really helpful to understand and have some case studies and be able to know, if there was a reason for an energy committee, for example, to get in touch with a local chamber and try to do some targeted outreach to raise awareness about this new tool, because it actually seemed like it might be promising for the mom and pop small business in your community that owns some building. That's a thing I have a question mark about and would love to better understand.
Sarah, am I correct in understanding that with regard to CPACER, if a town does nothing, eventually in a few years, they'll be able to do everything they could have done even if they had passed CPACER? That it's no. Okay.
No, close. I think I could be wrong, but I'm guessing what you're alluding to is that currently under statute, municipalities that have a town meeting form of governance have to request from the legislature of the town, which is the voters at town meeting, the authority to create an ordinance would authorize this financing to be available within that jurisdiction. It's like lots of words, but that's current. However, that is fairly impractical and unnecessary, and there's a bill working its way through and very, very likely to pass this legislative session that would make it so that a town with a select board could simply skip town meeting altogether. The legislature says, select board, you already have the authority, you can choose to create
see.
an ordinance.
I
So
see.
that's what a lot of towns are waiting for. So there's going to be a
Okay.
push this spring leading up to that bill being signed into law, where my team is helping communities become educated in what this is so that select boards can take it up at their own pace,
All right.
starting
So
whatever time this summer the bill becomes law.
becomes law. All right. So Merrimack has missed putting it on the ballot or anything, but
Which
all
is
hope is
totally fine. And it
not
will be,
lost. Let's hope the bill passes, and then
Yeah.
I can go to my town select board, which I have done in the past for certain things,
Yeah.
and ask them to vote to.
and hopefully you will get to ride on the coattails of the few towns that were right in the front of this. There's a few cities that are working on passing it now that will have sort of vetted and we'll be able to point to. And there's a handful of towns that are getting ready to jump as soon as the bill is signed. And then I expect there'll be the folks like Merrimack's who maybe are not chomping at the bit, but if you're able to point to the other communities that didn't have a problem with this, and the information from NHMA assuring the towns that there's no risk or liability for them, and it should be fairly easy to pass through once we've got some of that precedent for you.
So, so what I've sort of been hearing in this meeting is that there's kind of a lot that's riding on bills right now
Isn't
in
that always the case in February?
legislature, right? And we have a separate group that works on legislation, but it sounds like a lot of our work is predicated on whether certain legislation does or does not pass. So it sounds like it's in our best interest to really pay attention to the legislative actions, and I can send out the link on the website. It's the very first, right? Here I can even share, right? Everybody knows how to find the legislative actions, and it's this New Hampshire bill actions, and then you click New Hampshire bills of interest this week, and you can read which ones, and there's all sorts of instructions on our website on how to submit your position, et cetera, et cetera. I'm pretty sure that everybody on this call knows how to do all of that, but I did want to highlight that just in case, because I personally think I may have missed the fact that I should go ahead and support the CPACER related bill, because somehow in my mind, I just thought it was automatically going to happen. And we know that that's not really always the case, and we should go ahead and advocate for things like that.
Yeah, feel free. Fortunately, with that one, we think we've got the right stakeholders aligned. So we're not at all concerned, but it does not hurt in the least to have folks like you chiming in and saying we support this.
Okay, thank you.
There seems to be a little bit of a learning curve on the CPACER. Do you agree, Sarah? Because I presented it to the Energy Committee last month just because I felt like it would take them a while, because it took me a while to figure out why the town needs to support it. What's that all about? How come it's not just a regular loan? All those questions. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping Clean Energy New Hampshire will, as we go along, have a real good talking points and a way to educate the select board quickly and easily.
Exactly. And quickly and easily is a challenge, because we've gotten pretty good at the quick and easy concept, and almost every select board that every select board that I've been in front of so far has gotten the concept to the point of, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. The part where I'm noticing folks getting hung up is, okay, so how do I know this isn't going to add burden to my staff? And that's where we've got answers. They're not simple answers. And so what my team is working on right now is like doing the homework. We're going to be putting together a webinar on this topic with BFA, who's the actual partner that'll be working with town staff on this, just to try to make sure that we've got the right messenger and the right message to convince towns that this really isn't an administrative burden, and it really does not carry any risk to the town. It's very easy to say that, but when it comes to actually getting ready to vote, they're wanting the proof. So we're working on that. And that's part of where I was saying to Mary Beth, it's going to be a lot easier because every single one of them is asking, okay, well, who's adopted this so far? And at the moment, the answer is, well, nobody, because it's brand new and towns can't do it yet. And cities are in the process of, there's a few process of approving, but in a couple of months, it'll be a different story. It'll be, well, here's the 5 cities that have already adopted it. And here's a webinar that, this 30 minutes really digs in, and you can have your administrative staffer watch this and sort of be convinced that this is what it says it is. And here's the list of the other communities that are in process. That'll be a little bit easier, I sense.
And Sarah, am I right that nonprofits could be part of this? Because
yes,
we don't have any businesses in our town,
so
really, but we have Apple Hill.
Anything can be part of this except municipalities, which is kind of a bummer. But municipalities have access to bond financing, which is often better anyway. And then like single family or up to 4 units, so smaller housing. But everything else, 5 units and above, and kind of any other kind of building that's not residential and not municipal is eligible.
Thanks.
I think that's
and when I have asked the question of what is Nelson going to say when I pitch this, because tiny little town, barely any kind of commercial property, not going to have 100-unit housing development. And the answer has been from BFA, which runs the program, that because the lift to create the program is so minimal, if you've got even one corner store or even one like auto body shop and anybody with a building, this is a tool in their toolbox to be able to invest in getting their operating costs under control. And like you're investing in the viability of your local businesses with no burden on the town. You're just saying, here's another tool to help you shore up your physical infrastructure. So I think that's compelling. And I think it'll be more compelling when there's a lot of communities that have done this and there's no one saying this was a headache, this was terrible. They're just saying,
Most nonprofits want to raise funds. They don't want to take out loans. But I did ask the people at Apple Hill, they might be interested in a 0 interest loan, and they said yes. So
well, it's not a 0 interest loan, and that's really important to understand. There are 0 interest loans associated with like NH Saves projects, you can often get on-bill financing for a period of time at 0 interest. What CPACER does, there is an interest rate. What it does is it tries to balance the length of the loan against the rate, such that the actual monthly payment, you're not really thinking about the interest rate or the length of the loan. You're thinking about, what is my monthly payment going to be? And am I getting a projection from my contractor that I'm likely to save the same amount or more than my monthly payment will be? It changes the conversation. So instead of thinking about, I'm taking out a loan, or I'm using savings, or what's the interest rate, you're thinking about, what is my monthly cost of operating this building? And can I, with either a neutral outlay of money, because I'm saving the same amount as I'm paying every month, or maybe even a positive outlay of money, can I actually invest in better efficiency, most commonly, or even solar.
Thanks. You're reminding me why I'd like to go back and get an economics degree.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this is part of why I was saying my team would really like to dig in a little bit, because what I don't have are I mean, the list of lenders is growing that are offering these loans. They all offer slightly different. This is it's a free market commercial loans. Then they're all, each lender is a little bit different. But I would love to see some examples and be able to talk to nonprofits like that. Say, for this kind of project, for your kind of building, it is actually possible to get to like neutral. So it doesn't actually cost you anything to do this improvement, and you're improving your building. That would be lovely. But we have a little homework to do to be able to feel confident saying that that is actually possible through CPACER in New Hampshire. And that's the concept. That's why CPACER exists.
I see our little town of 1,700, which has, like you said, a garage, and
Yeah.
we don't have a store, but we've got a coffee shop, I guess. And they're always talking about low-income multifamily housing, though, and wanting to do that. So I see that as one application if this would be low to moderate income.
And honestly, CPACER doesn't care about what kind of housing it is. It just and this is where, if I was a developer, I could like yabber on about why this is so important, but there are certain components of the CPACER loan, the fact that it can cover 100% of eligible project cost, which is kind of rare. The fact that it, I mean, that's the big one, but there's a couple of other features of it that mean that if you are developing a housing property, like you're talking about, it fits in very nicely to the financing stack. It can't cover more than a third of the total like assessed cost of the project, but as part of the financing stack, it can make it so the developer doesn't have to put out as much equity up front to make the project happen. And the building is better for it, because you're investing in the building envelope and better windows and all of that stuff. It's a win-win for everyone. The developers really like it because of that component of being able to stretch their equity farther. So most of the reason why these bills are flying through to approve CPACER is because all of the really big influential developers in the state across party lines are calling the governor and saying, you have to do this if your priority is housing.
Okay,
Well, 'cause
that's good. And
Yeah.
you've been talking in terms of new development, but it doesn't have to be just on new
No.
buildings, right?
I mean, in New Hampshire, the reason this bill is flying through and that everyone's so excited about it is because the governor and others believe it can help with the housing crisis and help build projects. But it can apply to any kind of retrofit
Well,
or
I mean, here in
addition or new
Merrimack, right,
construction.
okay, so
Yeah.
Merrimack is the opposite of like Nelson and Sandwich. We have a huge Fidelity, office building, right? We have outlet malls, and even if you're huge like Fidelity, or if you're an outlet mall, you're eligible.
Yeah. Any commercial property owner. Now, the big box stores are tricky because their owners are like some Texas company 3 tiers up, and how are you going to get in contact with them to get them excited about this? But certainly any of those buildings, if the building owner had an interest in improving them, CPACER would be a way to do that. We just got to get the ordinances passed in all these communities so that we can start spreading the word.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if if that could be a draw, like Merrimack, we just lost the Budweiser Brewery, which was a big business. And if we're trying to attract more businesses to town, if we had something like a CPACER ordinance, would that be attractive to build, businesses moving in?
I mean, I don't know. I think that's a great question. I know that it's attractive to developers. But that's a different animal than the reasons why
Right.
businesses choose to locate in one place or another. But conceptually, if it's making it easier to build large commercial buildings, then that's not hurting a company that's wanting to come in and either build or retrofit a commercial building because they've got access to this financing that requires less equity outlay and yeah. And it can only be used on things that are related to energy or conservation or resilience. But because so much of what makes the building a building relates to building envelope and energy conservation, particularly for new construction, it can cover quite a lot. And for retrofits, it's sort of anything that has to do with improving that building shell or the systems or anything that has an influence on efficiency, renewable energy, and resilience, so like air safety, water quality.
Oh, and so I don't know if you have it on the top, off the top of your head, but what bill number is this? I'm assuming we can find it in our list and we look for green things we're supposed to support in our list of bills that we are looking at.
Yeah, just give me a sec. I don't want to misspeak. It's SB 440.
Okay.
And I can put that in the chat as well.
Okay, yep. I see it.
And just to be clear, it's already in statute. The bill that's being put forward is simply a follow-up and a fix. There was enough interest and sort of pushback that the burden on the municipalities is just so minor that just does not warrant going through a town meeting. And so they're fixing it so that is not necessary, that select board can just do it without needing that additional step. So it's a minute change to what is already in statute and fairly clearly understood.
I think, do you also, Sarah, have a clean energy flyer on CPACER?
Yeah, we do. I just put in the chat our bill summary, but in terms of a flyer on CPACER, yes. I can send you what I've been sending around. I can find a current version of it. We've got an FAQ, which gets into a lot of the questions we've been getting from towns as they're digging into it. The Building Finance Authority is really the place to go for the first level of information. They host the program and they've got a very nice website. And if I can find some notes, I'll drop them in the chat for you.
All right.
Here we go. And then the BFA website is the other big one. Sorry, what was that?
I was just saying, I'm also remembering that lots of states have just CPACE, but we have the R, because if you're doing resiliency work in your buildings, that's also part of it. So that's something to make sure people know.
Yeah, it's true. If you talk about this with people who know about CPACE, they call it CPACE because more than half of things like 28 states now in the country have some form of CPACE, commercial property assessed clean energy. It's a long-standing, like well-vetted kind of financing, and there's many lenders who specialize in this and offer this nationwide. And many of the first lenders who are going to be offering this in New Hampshire are folks that have been operating it elsewhere. And it is new and unique that we have the R at the end. And personally, I think it's kind of great. A couple of things there's many things that we have done to improve upon the model that's happened elsewhere. not limited to the fact that there's very minimal lift for the municipality. In many other states, the municipality has to run the program. But we took all of that off and put it on a third party, New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, which is great. And the resiliency piece, and not requiring that that the projects prove that they are going to save money. There are programs in other states where the program itself holds that bar, and there's quite a lot of complicated checks and follow-up. In New Hampshire, there you have to submit sort of that this is in line with the statute and in line with the intent of the legislation. However, it lets the market decide for example, this is why the resiliency thing works. If a business decides they want a CPACER loan, they're going to mix energy efficiency with some fire safety improvements and some other things. And on the net, they're not actually going to achieve that goal of having their loan payment be lower than their savings, but they don't care because it's still worth it to them. They should be able to make that choice. And we don't force them to, we let them make that choice, which I think is smart.
Val, I see a green outline around your name, but if you were speaking, we couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hi. No, I didn't.
Okay.
Didn't have a question. Thanks for asking though.
You mentioned this at the beginning, but since we're on the topic of legislation, I hope that any of you will reach out if you do have questions about the 538, which is the bill that's in the Senate right now, and we'll go over to the House soon, that would guarantee 20 years of net metering for municipal solar projects. And I mean, any political subdivisions, so counties, school districts, etc. There's a lot of folks helping us out by getting their select boards to sign on to a letter encouraging members of the House as well. We'll be sending it to support that bill. And we had a webinar at noon today that I now have a recording to if you want to really dive deep into why that is. But I think most of you are on there already. Val, I don't think I've heard from anyone in Enfield yet, so I don't know if you guys are looking at that, but just know that you can contact me with questions or if you want more information.
Can you give a high level of like why that 20-year window is important?
Yeah, basically, it's less important for like little town putting a small array on their library that's going to be basically just serving the energy used on site, and you're using taxpayer dollars to fund it. I mean, that's it's not so important to know that you're going to have net metering out that far, because you'll probably pay for your system before 2040 hits. It's more for the larger systems, which is not uncommon for municipalities, where you're relying on a third-party financer to help you pay for the system. There's a lot of towns that do that. It's really hard to get financing to do these power purchase agreement type projects unless the financiers can see that you're going to have net metering for at least 15, ideally more like 20 years. We just crossed the threshold where projects that started in 2025 were 15 years out from 2040, and they were still able to get reasonable financing terms. But we're now in 2026 and it's 14 years, and then it will be 13 years. And we are seeing a really scary and dramatic drop off of the developers who had been building solar arrays for municipal off-takers in this style. They're just leaving the state because they can no longer put the deals together unless we can get the legislature to agree to guarantee that even though the current rules say 2040 is when net metering, ends, which, by the way, if you want to learn more, Sam went into depth at noon about like the weird way we got to this place. And we're not even supposed to have this cliff, but New Hampshire is crazy, and hopefully we'll fix it in the future. We can fix this one this year, which is that we should not be handicapping towns, and we should be guaranteeing that if a municipality or political subdivision wants to invest in one of these solar arrays, we should be guaranteeing them 20 years access to net metering so that they have a chance of getting financing for those projects. That's the long and short of it.
Thank you.
I have a question for the group. I'd like to see more people on this so we get more towns and their ideas. Is there a way to market this little meeting so we can get more folks
Good question.
to come from energy committees or other supporting folks?
Yeah.
It doesn't the energy committees.
Honestly, I think that's going to come down to me. So I think you need Clean Energy New Hampshire to step up and be more regularly involved in helping get a topic and then sending that out. I've got a very robust list of energy groups. And when I email them, telling them to come to this and that there's a topic, that's when we get like 15, 20 people. So I think that's what we need to do. And Mary Beth knows, because I couldn't remember if we'd changed the meeting time. And so I was emailing Mary Beth earlier this week going, I think we might have dropped this, which we hadn't. But I mentioned that email and I meant it, Mary Beth. I think if we could get a pre-scheduled meeting where we decide on a topic or a frame, and then I send it out to that whole list and you send it out to New Hampshire Network, and we get into an actual rhythm of that and see how that does, I think that might help. And to that end, if any of us have a thought about a topic that might be good for March or a thing to be a cornerstone of a discussion, that would be helpful in terms of framing and encouraging folks to come.
And even if some of the topics feel old, I don't know how you guys feel about it. Because on the one hand, New Hampshire Saves, Energy, Button Up, I mean, that's been around for a while. But on the other hand, I think you can be eligible for a re-audit, like when we originally approached my town, our town manager was like, oh yeah, we did that like 10 years ago or something. And technology has changed. And maybe if we redo the energy audit, so I didn't push, but, maybe if I push to redo the energy audits, we might find a whole, right? 10 years ago, heat pumps were not what they were today, right? And people weren't recommending them, I don't think, the way they were today or the way they are today. So but you tell me, I was going to say, my gut says that even though we may think some of the topics are old and been done to death, maybe not. But you guys can say, yeah, they have been. Mary Beth, stop beating the dead horse. Dory.
So just a couple of clarifying questions since this is my first meeting with this group. Is the audience energy committees that have as their main purview municipalities and municipal buildings, or can it be more broad and include residents? And
It can definitely include residents. As a matter of
Okay.
fact, in the first couple years of its inception, it was less about energy committees and more about anybody. But the people who seemed to come tended to be people who were like, well, we each have an energy committee in our town, so let's work together. And what's your town doing? What's your town doing? And,
Okay.
get ideas from each other, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, if it can include residents, then, but the second part of the question is, does it need to include everybody in the state? Because to me, the new Eversource program of the moderate income, I guess, I don't know if it's a rebate or if it's probably an upfront.
Oh yeah, getting Mercedes to come and talk about that.
Yeah,
That's a great idea.
I think that could be really helpful to
Yeah.
lots of people.
And I mean, I get that it's only Eversource, but it is inspiring, and we are the action group. So if someone here was an NHEC customer and came away from that and called up NHEC and said, hey, have you heard what Eversource is doing?
Right.
Yeah, I would say, right. I think that's a great idea as well, even though not all residents are Eversource customers.
So as an NHEC customer, what is Eversource doing? Can you give us the quick summary of the detail?
Yes, they've got a new program that is an income qualified program for moderate income households. And they define that as 100% or less of the state median income, and that varies by household size. If you meet that criterion, then you are eligible, instead of $6,000 and 75% of your project, you are eligible for $15,000 to and 100% of your project. So it is a really significant increase in what you can get to help, your building envelope, your home
And what
building.
are what are the guidelines for the project? What kind of projects qualify?
This would be weatherization and insulation, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Sure, Catherine.
I would, well, Dory, I would love that, to have that person come. And also, I think because energy committees have had some fails, maybe it would be nice to talk about energy committee successes, so that maybe folks that were a little burnt from their last town meeting or two might have some energy pumped into them. And it is interesting to hear ideas. I get a lot of ideas from what other towns are doing.
And I'll admit, I have felt at least some modicum of comfort, at least being able to share my woes with a community as well, who knows how hard it is to try to get solar panels on the town garage, only to have everything to fall through after 2 years of working hard and, you know.
And we also had energy audits done 2011, 2012, and there was not even a question about getting it done again.
Getting it done again.
Yeah.
All right. So in the interest of keeping to time, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you all very much. I will post the recording and I will scrub up the AI summary as notes in the meeting chat. And I will send around an email once that is up on the website. And if anybody is interested in co-leading this organization, I agreed to take it over when the former person who was running it, just couldn't do it anymore. But I'm happy to have help and more suggestions or whatever, because I kind of took it over because nobody else would, and I didn't want it to die, So I'm happy to have help and suggestions. All right. Thank you all very much.
And thank you, Mary
Thank
Beth.
you.
Thank you for taking it over.